Well, hey, friends, and welcome to NC Family's weekly update for the week ending July the 14th. Well, Jerry and Sharon, good to see y'all.
Hi.
I think the big news this week was what actually did not happen at the General Assembly. Of course, we were expecting the possibility of veto override votes in the North Carolina House on Wednesday on House Bill 574, the Fairness in Women's Sports Act, and also House Bill 808, which would prohibit the administration of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and gender reassignment surgeries on minors in North Carolina. But those votes did not happen.
Nope.
Speaker Tim Moore actually indicated that several members were out of town, and the House was not going to take up these veto override votes unless a sufficient number of members were in town to override the governor's veto of these bills. So kind of where does this leave us now?
Yeah. Well, just as a reminder, John, on the veto overrides for all of us, what it requires is 3/5 of the members present and voting. So I think they have to assume everybody's going to be there. Democrats, all will be there. So that would mean for the Republicans to override, if on these votes, it's going to be a strict party line vote, 72 Republicans would need to be present. This week, there were 58 present. So people, as you said, John, whether it's business commitments or vacation time they had planned for, it apparently is going to be a while before people are going to be back in town.
Right. They'll reevaluate every week and just see what the numbers are really every day moving forward when they're meeting.
Well, and Sharon and Jerry, I know y'all both were down at the legislature on Wednesday and you were going around talking to members. It was sort of seemed like a ghost town, I think in some respects. But I know that y'all were talking with, a handful of legislators, but also legislative assistants who were saying that those House members were not in town. And so, it's hard to predict at this point when these votes may be likely. I know that they've calendared these veto override votes for next Wednesday, anticipating the possibility of votes, but I think it seems kind of unlikely. What do y'all think?
I would think probably not next week would just be my guess based on who I spoke to and what I saw. But, you never really do know because if we don't have enough of either party showing up, you just have to do the math every single day and see who's there.
Yeah. And as the speaker said, they're highly unlikely to take the votes unless they know the votes are there to override the governor.
Right.
So it's going to be kind of touch and go in the coming weeks. To see what the likelihood of those votes taking place are going to be before the end of session. We fully expect that they're going to take these override votes, and in the Senate, the vote on the Parents' Bill of Rights as well, which is also a veto override. But we're just going to have to kind of wait and see what the prospects are of when those votes will actually take place. Now, the House and Senate are also continuing to debate the budget, kind of behind closed doors. The conferees that are meeting to discuss the budget are continuing to, debate. There are a number of items that are still in contention. The House has certain priorities. The Senate has certain priorities. But the reports this week were not real encouraging that the House and Senate were close to coming to agreement on those things.
Yeah, early on, they agreed apparently to the total, which is around $30 billion. Yeah. So obviously a lot of money, but that also means that's a lot of different provisions. And I don't know, it hadn't been public about what the specific provisions are. We have heard about things like compensation for state employees and teachers, tax reductions, that there are differences of opinion about what those amounts should be within that $30 billion total.
Yeah.
So hopefully they're getting closer. Like you say, John, there was a hint of optimism. Some of them talking about maybe mid-August that they'll resolve. It's all guessing. That's one of the interesting things about being at the legislature. I don't want to call them, maybe not the right word is rumors, but different ideas about when things will happen. Somebody yesterday said, well, the 24th of July, which obviously would be sooner than mid-August, but it seems like mid-August is the time frame that heard more than most other time estimates.
Yeah, and I would say even though Republicans hold majorities and supermajorities actually in both chambers of the legislature, they do have different priorities, and so there are discussions and debates that are ongoing with respect to that. One really troubling item that we've mentioned before, but that seems to still be in discussion is the prospect of the legislature approving gambling casinos in North Carolina and also video lottery terminals, which are essentially video poker machines that would be operated under the auspices of the state lottery. Now, we've been debating, discussing, and talking with you all about all of the problems inherently associated with gambling and the negative impacts that gambling and gambling addiction has on citizens, families, and communities across the state. We continue to express huge concerns about the discussion over casinos and video lottery terminals in North Carolina, especially on the heels of the General Assembly just weeks ago legalizing sports gambling in the state. And so it's really concerning that these discussions and debates are continuing to go on. But I would just encourage our listeners and our supporters to go to the links to our Action Center under the video where you can either reach out by phone or email legislators and urge them not to support these proposals for continued gambling expansion in North Carolina.
Right.
Side note to that, John,
Yeah.
once again this week, North Carolina ranked up at the top. Place to do business. We continue to be place to live. And you're thinking, why or how does anybody think that more gambling is going to help that? If anything, we know it's going to do the opposite.
Right.
So
The
it's
human
troubling.
cost is huge with things like that. And really, why would we need it? If we're ranked so high, why do we need the tax revenue from this?
On one hand, North Carolina is a top-rated state to live, to do business, and that a lot of that is because of the good tax policies that have been adopted and implemented by the legislative leadership and the legislature. And for them to, consider this as a reasonable proposal for balancing the budget or for generating revenue to the state is just hard to even conceive. So we're going to continue to urge our lawmakers not to approve these very harmful policies.
Right.
And again, as you've said, John, most importantly, even if it did help economically, we know what it does to families, to individuals. The harm that brings, you can't put a price
No.
on the harm. I mean, well, you can, and it's much, much bigger than any economic gain.
Yeah, no doubt. Good point, Jerry. Well, one piece of good news this week that we heard were reports coming out of the House from both the Speaker of the House and other House leaders that they are very unlikely to consider the bill that would legalize marijuana in North Carolina. Now, this bill was passed by the Senate months ago and has been sitting in the House. It's been discussed and debated, as we understand it, in the House Republican caucus. They sort of have a policy that if a majority of members of the House Republican caucus don't support an issue, then they're not going to bring it up for a vote.
Right.
And that's where things, as we understand it, stand right now in the House, that a majority of the House Republican caucus do not support the legalization of marijuana for medical purposes or otherwise in North Carolina. So that's a very positive thing, but we have got to remain vigilant because the pressure is not going to go away. There's going to be continued pressure from the Senate and from those who would profit from the legalization of marijuana in North Carolina. So we've got to stay on top of this as well.
I want to take the time to thank everyone for what they have done. It's because of you and your efforts that we are standing strong in this and why they are not voting positively to move this forward. So thank you for all you do, and we ask that you would continue to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so important that lawmakers hear from their constituents. So don't ever underestimate the impact that you can have. I really believe that this is the reason why this marijuana bill has not moved forward in the House, is because citizens across the state have contacted your House members and said, no, we do not want this in North Carolina. We don't need another major drug problem in our state. So thank you, as Sharon said, for your continued efforts in this and the many other important bills that we have that are still in play in the legislature. Jerry, Sharon, do y'all have anything else? I mean, it's kind of, there's activity going on, but not a lot of committee meetings and not a lot of bills being debated and voted on in the floor of the House or the Senate.
As you said, John, we'll let y'all know when we start hearing about the possibility of votes being taken, because just as you said, it makes a difference. It continues to. I hate to even say on last night, the battle never ends. We've
true.
already heard, even though they've said not going to vote, it looks like on marijuana's medicine this year, they're not letting up. They've got another year on this particular bill that they can continue to push it. So y'all are great encouragement to us. Thank you for working together with us.
We appreciate you. Keep it up.
Yep, absolutely. Well, friends, thanks so much, as always, for your time and attention. We appreciate it. We will be back next week, providing another update at the end of the week. But we're so grateful for you. We're grateful for your support, for your prayers especially. So keep it up, and thanks, and God bless.